Hi, in this tutorial I will show you how you can use Lucidchart for database design and modeling. So basically Lucidchart is an online multi-purpose diagram tool. It can be used to also create database diagrams or entity relationship diagrams. You can use it for free, but it has some paid options as well. Typically the free option is good enough for schoolwork, a single project, a student project, etc. You can also share and collaborate your work with others. And also Lucidchart has a built-in entity relationship diagram template that you can use. In order to start using Lucidchart, you just need to go to the homepage, create an account and start using it. It's a tool that you use inside your web browser. So before we start using Lucidchart for database design and modeling, let's dig into some design fundamentals when it comes to data design, database design and modeling. So here you see a basic example. Here you have two tables or entities. So this is one entity or one table, and this is another entity or table. And in each table, then you have a name, typically on top here. So this is the name of the table or the entity, and this is the name of the table or the entity for this entity. And then here you have different attributes, also called columns. So here you have sensor ID, sensor name, description, etc. And here you have the different column names for this specific entity. And then you typically create a relationship between two entities using an arrow like this. So basically, also when you are using different tools, each design tool has some different name convention or different shapes of the different entities, etc. But this is the basic features in an entity relationship diagram. So you have one or more entities, or also called tables, and in each table or entity you have what you call attributes or columns. And also two tables are typically in relationship between each other because each table has a primary key, and then in this second table you also have a so-called foreign key. So the relationship between two tables are this sensor ID, which is the primary key here, and also here you have sensor ID, which is the foreign key. So that's the relationship between these two tables. So it's these kind of diagrams that we are going to create using Lucidchart. So this is called an entity relationship diagram. In general, we have lots of database design and modeling tools. I guess there exist hundreds, probably thousands of different tools for database design and modeling. And most of those cost a lot of money, while others has some free alternatives. I guess there are many tools that are specialized for database design and modeling, like Irwin Data Modeler, MySQL Workbench, etc. But there are also other tools that are more general purpose diagram tools, like Visio from Microsoft, Miro, Lucidchart that we will use in this tutorial, Draw.io, etc. Typically the advantages with these specialized tools like Irwin, MySQL Workbench, etc. that you can typically, after you have created your entity relationship diagram, you can generate SQL code that you can use in your database system in order to generate and insert the tables in your database system. But also Lucidchart has a simple but very good feature for generating SQL scripts that we will use later in this tutorial. So here you see some examples of entity relationship diagrams. This is typically a student system where we have different tables for school, class, different courses, teachers, students, etc. So that's one example. Here's another example And this is typically on the order system where you have tables or entities for customers, orders, items that are part of the order, product, and different product types. So these are two examples that are created with the Lucidchart. Before we start using Lucidchart, let's go through some basic database tips and tricks. I recommend that you use uppercases in the table names, like this example. So these are the name of the tables. Here I'm using uppercases, and then here for the different columns or attributes I'm using Pascal notation. So then it's easy to see the difference between the table name or entity name and the different column names or attributes like this. So basically, I recommend use uppercases for table names. I also prefer to use singular form. So here I'm using customer, not customers. Here I'm using order, not orders. Here I'm using item, not items, and product, not products, etc. Then it's easier to remember the name of your different tables if you are always using this standard. And as mentioned, I recommend to use Pascal notation for the column names. And also you should use English names both for your table names and for your column names. So as you see here, table names, column names, Pascal notation, and table names uppercase. Also prefer to use the primary keys and set them to just running numbers like 1, 2, 3, etc. Then you can in SQL Server use this identity 11, and then these primary keys are automatically generated by the system, and then every time you insert a new row in a specific table, it will get a primary key 1, 2, 3, etc. And the good thing using primary keys, foreign keys, relationships between the different tables, it ensures that you don't have or need to have duplicated data, and also you have a security that you cannot fill in illegal data into the different tables. I also prefer to use the same name for the primary key and the foreign key, but that's not necessary. So you see here in the customer table I have a primary key called customer ID, and in the order table I have also named the foreign key the same as the primary key here, namely customer ID. And the same here in the order table this primary key is order ID, and here in the item table I have also named the foreign key order ID. And the same for product ID, product ID, product type ID, and product type ID. And also another tip, in each table you typically need to have a column called the name or something. Here in the customer you have a name column for the customer name. Here you have a name for your product, and here you have a name for your product type. Here you could just specify name. Here you could specify name, and also here you could just specify or use the name. But in order to distinct between customers, products, product types, here I use product type name, here I use product name, and here I can use customer name or split into first name, last name, etc. If I had used just name in all these tables, it could be confusing when creating SQL queries, etc. A last tip is to not use too many different data types. Here on the primary keys I just use integer for all my primary keys, and also specify this identity 11, meaning it's just a running number. While for text I typically use either varchar 50 or varchar 100. In that case you just don't need so much different data types. Also here for numbers like total price I'm using float. So basically I just stick to integer, varchar 50, 100 or float. That's the three most used data types. typically also if you need to enter a date, you can also use the date time data type. Then let's dig into Lucidchart and how we can use it for database modeling and creating entity relationship diagrams. Just a overview of Lucidchart. As mentioned, it's an online tool that you use in your web browser. It's a general tool for making or creating different types of diagrams, but you can also use it for creating database diagrams because it has a built-in template for entity relationship diagrams. It comes in a free edition, but it has also different paid versions where you have more features. In order to start using it, you just go into their homepage, create an account, and start using the Lucidchart inside your default web browser. You have to note that this free version has some limitations. You can just create 3 different diagrams, but typically that's good enough for single project, student work, or student projects. And also within each diagram, you can create multiple entity relationship diagrams by creating multiple pages, or you can have multiple entity relationship diagrams within one Lucidchart diagram. So basically the free plan should be good enough for many purposes. So then let's start using Lucidchart. I just type the name here in Google and then just open their homepage. So now I'm logged into the system as you see here, but if you haven't created a user, just sign in for free and create an account using your email address, or you can also use Google, Microsoft account, etc. And then when you are logged into the system, you just click here on Lucidchart in order to open this online diagram tool. Just make it a little bit bigger, like this. So here in the bottom you see an overview of existing diagrams that you can click on and open, but let's create a new one. So then I just select new and then select Lucidchart blank document, and then it takes a couple of seconds in order to create a blank diagram. And then since you are going to use this tool for creating entity relationship diagrams, we can just select here more shapes and then select entity relationship here, select this one, and then just use selected shapes. And then you see this palette has been created here, where you have different types of objects that we can use to create entities or tables. So we have this basic one, which looks like this. I can make it a little bit bigger. This one is a basic shape with the name of the entity or the table and the different columns or attributes like this. Then you have this one, which is a bit more advanced. In addition to the different fields, you can also specify keys like primary keys, foreign keys, etc. So that's this one. And then we have this one where we can also specify a data type. So we have different types that you can choose between. We have also this one. So we have 4 different types actually. So typically I prefer either this one where you can specify the fields or the column names and the name of the entity and primary keys, foreign keys, etc. Or this one where you can also specify the data type like this. So either use this one. Typically if you're going to create a logical diagram, you may use this one, start with this one, and then later you typically want to create a physical diagram for a specific database like Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, etc. Then you can use this one. And also if you start to use this one, you can change it to this one later. So So then let's start creating a simple entity relationship diagram for a student system or a school system where you can enter students, different courses, grades, etc. Then I start by using this one, where you can specify the table name. So let's create a table called student, and then you could start by creating a primary key called the student ID, like this, and then this will be the primary key. Then you may want to create a field or a column name or attribute called student name, like this. You need you can specify, instead of student name, I can specify first name, last name. Typically you need to have an address, so by default it's three fields that you can specify here, but if you click on it here you can specify a number of fields. If I just increase it by 4, then you can create a new one for the address or something. And also assume you want to have an email address for the student, then you can create 5 fields and then email address, like this. This one don't have a key, so I just remove it, like this. So now I have created my first entity or my first table, the table name and the different fields or attributes or column names, and this student ID is the primary key. I can also specify different shades here. I can have the table name in a gray background, like this. You can also have different shades for like this, but I prefer this look like this, where you have the name of the table in the gray background and the other one like this. Let's create a new table. Then I just select this entity relationship object here and create a new table. So then let's create a table called school, like this, and then typically we have a school ID, which is the primary key, like this. I just remove this other fields. I can have, of course, school name, I could also have each school typically have a web page, website. Sorry, it's in the wrong place here. Website, like this. Also this one is removed. So now I created another table. I also make this shaded header like this. So now a school table with a primary key called school ID and 2 additional columns like school name, website. I can also create more column names here if I want to. Next, let's create a new table called class, and I can also just copy this one. I can just change the name to class, and then class ID, class name, and also typically each school could have multiple classes, so then typically I want to create a relationship between the school table and the class table. So then I just create a foreign key here, and I typically want to have the same name for the primary key and the foreign key, so then I just type school ID here, and then I can specify foreign key here. And in order to create the relationship between these two tables, since I have the primary key here and the foreign key here, I just select the foreign key and drag it to the primary key and drag it to the foreign key, like this. So now I have created a relationship between these two tables. Also make it like this. So now this school ID is the primary key here in this table, and school ID here is the foreign key in this table. let's create a new table, and then I just copy this one, where I can of course get a fresh one from here. Let's create a table or entity called course. Then typically I want to have a primary key called course ID. Instead of school name, I want to have course name, like this. I don't have a web page for a course, but typically a course is linked to a specific school, so then I need to have a foreign key here called school ID, and then I specify this to be a foreign key, and then I use this relationship tool in order to create a relationship between the primary key here and the foreign key here, like this. I also want to create a table for different teachers. I just copied this one. I call it teacher with uppercases. Then I have a primary key called teacher ID. Instead of course name, I have a teacher name. Here I could also use first name, last name, as I did for the student, but I just leave it like this. I can also drag here to make it a little bit bigger. Typically, I also need to have an email for the teacher, as I had for the student. This is not a foreign key, so I remove it. But typically, you have in each course you have a specific teacher, so then I typically also need to have one more foreign key here, so then I go from fields number 3 to 4, and then I specify teacher ID here, and this one is also a foreign key, and then I just create a relationship from teacher ID here, which is the primary key, to the foreign key teacher ID here. And also I can change it to Pascal notation, like this. So now we have 4 tables, one for school, class, specific course, and teachers. And in each school we can have one or more classes, and for one school we can have one or more courses, and also for each course we need to have a teacher. And then we have the student table here. Typically now we can create many more tables, but at least we need one more table that link the student to a specific course. And in a specific course we can have multiple students, and also one student can join multiple courses. So then typically I want to create a new table. I just copy this one, copy this one, and then I can name it. So now I'm going to create a table that are linking the different courses with the different student, and then I can just name it course underscore student. Of course you can name it in a different way, but I prefer to do it like this. And then we need to have a primary key here that links these two together. So then we could have we need to have a course ID, and we need to have student ID, and both these are both primary keys, and it will be foreign keys. Since course ID exists here in the course table as a primary key, then it will also, so these two together will be a primary key, but course ID will also be a foreign key for this table, and student ID will also be a foreign key for the student table. And then I can just specify both primary key and foreign key like this. So then I just also need to link them together. So here I'm having the primary key, I link it to the course ID here, and here I have the student ID, which I link to the student ID here, like this. So this table has now one primary key, which is a combination of the course ID and the student ID, while also these are also foreign keys. To the course ID is the a foreign key here and a primary key here, and the student ID is also a foreign key here and a primary key here. Typically I also need to have to enter a specific grade, because in each course the student need to have a grade. So then I can just enter a new field here. I'll call it grade, like this, and this is doesn't have any key, like this. Another way to do it is to create also here, as I did in the other tables. I have a school ID, which is just a running number, class ID, a running number, etc. I can also do the same here. So if I specify another field there, I can call it course student ID or something. And now typically this will be the primary key, and also typically I want to have the primary key on top, so then I can just select it and drag it like this to have it on top. And now this will not be the primary key, it will just be a foreign key. And also the same here, this will not be part of the primary key, but just a foreign key, like this. So that's another way to do it. And now each table has a primary key, which is just a running number, like this. So now we have created our logical entity relationship diagram for this student system. Typically we may want to include this one in a report or a PowerPoint or whatever. Then you have some nice features for importing this as an image. So then basically you can just select File, go to Export, and select PNG. You can set as a PNG file or with a transparent background like this, and then just click. And you can also select Quality and just select Download, and then this file will be downloaded to your hard drive, typically in this download folder. So let's start just by deleting everything I have here. And also here's the name of your diagram. So here I can select or create a specific name. So I can call it student entity relationship diagram or something. And when I select File, Export, PNG, click Download, and then goes to the download folder, and you see I have created an image called student erd.png, and then you can easily import this image into a text document like Word or a PowerPoint, etc. And also for my ER diagram, I have created this relationship one-to-many for all my tables, but you can also easily change it by just selecting different endpoints and start points here. That way you can create different types of relationship between the different tables. So if I just select the relationship, here I select what symbol I'm going to use here, one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many, one-to-one, etc. So I just specify the proper symbol for this part, and the same here for the end part. I specify the proper relationship. But typically the most used is one-to-many, which is like this. So this is one-to-many. So by default, Lucidchart use this so-called Crowfoot notation because this symbol looks like a crowfoot. Lucidchart supports different types of relationship. We have one, many, one and only one, zero or one or many, or zero or many. So you have different types of relationships: one to one, one to many, many to one, many to many, etc. And then you can easily change these relationships in using the editor in Lucidchart. So now we have created our first entity relationship using Lucidchart. Typically now we want to insert these tables in a database system. I will use SQL Server from Microsoft, but you typically have different types of database systems. SQL Server from Microsoft, MySQL database system from Oracle, etc. But in order to do that, you typically also need to specify a proper data type. So then I can change from this object by using this one instead, and then I can specify a proper data type for my different columns. So the school ID, since it's a primary key with just a running number, I prefer integer. School name, I just prefer to use varchar, for instance, 100. So just copy this one since I'm going to use this a lot. And it's recommend that you don't create too many different types. Also for the website, I just typically want to use varchar 100, meaning the website can contain up till 100 characters, and the same for the school name. Then I do the same for all tables. I change the shape to this one. And you do that for everyone. Like this. Just drag them a little bit, make them a bit larger. This. Same for this one. And then just make sure it looks nice. Same for the teacher table, like this. I can also same for the class, like this. Also make sure that the lines are looking nice, like this. So now I just need to enter the different data types for the class. This is a primary key. I just need to use, typically want to use integer. Class name, varchar 100. School ID is a foreign key, so also here I use integer since it's an integer here. Course ID is a primary key, integer. Course name, typically varchar 100. School name is a foreign key to the school table, so also here I use specify integer. Teacher ID is a foreign key to this table, also here it's integer. And this one then is of course integer. Teacher name, varchar 100. Email could also be varchar 100. Course student ID, primary key, just a running number, integer. Course ID comes from here, so it's also an integer. Student ID comes from here, so I specify integer here. First name could be just here, just use varchar 100 to make it simple, like this. Course ID, student ID, also then integer, and grade could be it could be a grade. It could be just depending on your grading system. Typically you have letters A, B, C, etc. So then you can just use varchar 1 actually in this case. So now I specified the data types for all columns. I also typically want to use these primary keys to be just running numbers, so then I can just specify using this identity 1. This means it will be a running number, is increasing with 1 every time I create a new record in that specific table. So I just copy this because I want to do the same for all my primary keys, like this. Yeah, for this one. So now I'm almost finished creating my entity relationship diagram for my SQL server. Typically, you also want to specify that this you don't want to have two school names which is the same, so these school names should typically be unique. So then you can also specify that by just typing unique like this. So this means that the school name will be unique. I can do the same for some other tables as well. Typically you don't want to have two classes with the same name. So then here we can also specify unique like this. Of course you can have two teachers with the same name. You can also have two students with the same name like this. But typically a student typically have a student number. So then typically you want to have one more column here called each student has a unique student number like this. And then this could be Varshar, let's say 10 or something. It's a unique student number. Typically also this doesn't have any key. I just typically also want this to be here. I can just drag it like this. So then this student number should be unique. Then I can also type here unique for this student number like this. So now we are more or less finished. Typically also may want to choose if some columns or should be allowing to have null or not null, like this, student over here, this class name. You can specify that you don't want to allow a null. It needs to be a specific name. Then I can also specify here not null like this. I can also make it a little bit larger. I can also do the same for the course name, for the school name, etc. But let's just start with this one, and let's see how we can export this diagram to my local SQL Server database. So then I go to my SQL Server, and for SQL Server we have a tool called SQL Server Management Studio, which you see here. So here I have some existing databases. So let's start by creating a new one, new database. I want to have a student system or whatever. So I just name the database students. I click OK. And then here I click new query. And now I'm going to make an SQL query with the different tables that I can insert into this database. So then I go back to Lucidchart, find here in the entity relationship toolbox. I'm using this export feature, click on this one, and then I can specify what kind of database system you are using, either MySQL, Oracle SQL, PostgreSQL, or in my case SQL Server from Microsoft. And then you see it creates a table script. It create table for the school table, same for the class table, teacher table, course table, and student table, etc. And then basically I can just click here, copy to clipboard, click done, go back to SQL Server Management Studio, and then you see I have now created a SQL script that will be creating these different tables and put it into my student table. I can also save it here on my hard drive. I just save it on my hard drive in a temporary folder called students table or something. And then Also, since I'm going to insert these tables into the students database, I need to make sure that students are also selected here, and then I can just click here on execute in order to insert these tables into my database, and it was successfully. Then here I can go to the students database, click refresh, and then you see my tables has been created here in my database. So basically that's how easy it is to create a database diagram and entity relationship diagram in Lucidchart, and then later export it as an SQL file, and then just open the SQL file in your database system, in my case SQL Server, and then I'm using the SQL Server Management Studio in order to insert these tables into my database. So this operation, if you first create the diagram in Lucidchart or another tool, and then insert the tables in a database system like SQL Server, it's called forward engineering, but you can also do the opposite by starting with your database system and then create the diagram later. So that's typically called backward engineering, because you do it in the opposite way. Let's see how we can do that as well. So then let's go back to Lucidchart. Then you can go to the main page where you have your different documents and create a new one. But as mentioned, in this free version you can only create 3 different diagrams, and I have also created 3 different already, so I cannot create a 4th one. So if I now try to create a 4th diagram, I will get this message: you have used your limit, which is 3 Lucidchart documents or diagrams. You can create more diagrams, but then the document that you was using last will be read-only. So that's okay. I can either create a new one here, but also another trick here. In one Lucidchart diagram, I can create different or have multiple pages. So I can just here, pages 1. I can also click here to add a page, and then I can also create a new entity relationship diagram here. And in this case, I now want to do the opposite. I have already existing database here in SQL Server. So here I have a database called books. It consists of 4 tables, one for author, one for category, publisher, and a 4th table called the book. So these 4 tables I now want to import into Lucidchart. So then I go back here, select the import button, and then select SQL Server, and then here run this query on your database. So then I basically just copy it to the clipboard, go back to SQL Server Management Studio, paste it, and then just click. Make sure I select the database I want to use, in this case books, click execute, and then I get this result, which is basically an overview of all the tables, the primary keys, the foreign keys, etc. for my books database. So then when I get this result, I can just basically right click here, save results, and save it on the hard drive as a file. So then I just save this file on a temporary folder, and then I can just call it books tables or something, and then I will create a CSV file like this. I just click save. I can go to my file explorer, and then in my temp folder you see I have created this this file called bookstables.csv, and then I will use it here to import these tables into Lucidchart. So then I click click next there. You can either paste it or upload it from a file on your computer. Then I just choose the file we just created, books tables, click open, and then basically just click import. And then you see these tables has been created here. So I have the author table, the book table, the category table, and finding the publisher table like this. So in that way you can easily create an entity relationship based on an existing database. So for some reason the relationships between the different tables hasn't been created, but you can easily do that by just finding the primary key here and the foreign key here, the same here, primary key, foreign key, primary key, and foreign key. And then you have a finished entity relationship diagram for your book database. So that's all for now. So basically you can use Lucidchart for creating your entity relationship diagrams. Lucidchart in the free version has some limitations, but you can easily use it for creating diagrams from scratch and then export them to different types of database systems like MySQL, SQL Server, etc. And you can also do it the opposite way, import tables from a database system and then automatically create an entity relationship diagram based on these the import file that you are creating. In Lucidchart, in the free version, you have only 3 Lucidchart diagrams that you can create. You can create multiple, more than 3 diagrams, but then the oldest diagram will be read-only. But a way to avoid that, if you need more than 3 entity relationship diagrams, you can create multiple pages within each Lucidchart diagram. So that's all for now. So good luck creating your database design and your database modeling. Thank you and goodbye.